All right, guys, personally, I absolutely hate making videos like this. So Sedona and I came out to the creek to enjoy it a little bit more. But I'm filming on the Nikon ZR right now in Red Raw. I absolutely love this camera, and we've been using it way more than I ever expected. And I think the only reason I buy this camera is for the Red Raw and the screen. But with that, there's a lot of flaws with this camera. Yes, this camera is amazing. The Red Raw is stunning. I really do think at the price point, this camera is totally worth buying if you've been looking at it. But there's some things you have to be aware of, and that's what we're gonna get into. So I'm gonna have some help from a friend or two. Last thing too, before we get into this, I'm filming currently on the ZR in Red Raw with the Z35 f1.4 lens. I got this lens with a kit. Yes, I bought this camera myself, and I bought it with this lens. I thought I was just gonna get rid of the lens because I was like, I don't need another 35. Oh my God, this lens alone has got me using the ZR even more. It kind of reminds me of some of my vintage Leica glass, like the optical vignetting on it. I don't know what to call it, but I don't know if you could tell, right behind me, it's super blurry, but as you get in the edges, it comes a little bit more into focus. So it kind of has like this vintage character while still being incredibly sharp. Great flare control, some slight chromatic aberrations, like all the right character at the right levels, in my opinion. For this lens being like a $400 or $500 lens, oh my God, I'm obsessed with it. For the rest of this video, I'll be switching to the Lumix S1 II with the new Sirui full frame 1.33x full frame anamorphics. Before I start talking about this, already the 4-inch screen on the ZR, this needs to be a standard moving forward with all camera brands. The S1 II is still my workhorse because all the features and hiccups that the ZR has, the S1 II has all these features already. You guys will learn about here in a second. Frankly, I'm sick and tired of talking about gear. I want to create more. But I had to talk about this because, you know, a lot of us are really obsessing over this ZR as it deserves to be. Now, I don't want this video to come off like a hit piece. I spent my own $3,000 on this guy right here, the Nikon ZR with the 35mm f1.4. I have zero buyer's remorse. Absolutely love this. With all that said, this camera feels incredibly messy. It feels like a Frankenstein of a camera. And honestly, this camera has no business looking this good in the Red Raw. It's truly impressive, especially it's like a $200 or $2,200 camera. It's wild. If this didn't have Red Raw, I probably wouldn't have bought this. So while the Red Raw is the highlight of this camera, it also kind of feels like an afterthought. It kind of feels like it was tossed in there last minute and they just got it to work and then sent it. So time for my list here. First off, LUTs for Red Raw. You can finally import your own LUTs into a Nikon camera, into the Nikon ZR. Sadly, currently, it only works in Red Raw. So if I'm not using Red Raw, because this gets into another issue, there's no compression ratios. So with Red cameras, what makes them so freaking amazing is you can shoot in RAW, but in different compression ratios and save so much on memory size. We don't have any of that. The quality for the Red Raw is at like max quality. So the file sizes are huge, which makes this very confusing because they're putting like the ultimate Kodak in here at ultimate quality. Yeah, it's priced for, you know, more of a beginner entry level opportunity to get to a Nikon system. And so it's like, what? Do you see what I mean already? We're starting now. So when you switch out Red Raw to save some file space, say if you go to H.265, the H.265 does look a little bit mushy, and I'm assuming they're doing that to stop it from overheating, or who knows, I don't know. But with that, if you're shooting in NRAW or in H.265, you can't use any of your LUTs. Like how LUTs should just work across the whole, whatever Kodak you're in. I don't get why that's blocked out. Now going back into using LUTs for the Red Raw, when you use the LUTs of Red Raw, the focus peaking goes away. Like what? I've never seen that before. The focus peaking will work in Red Log when you don't have any view assist or LUTs on. Why would they do that? That makes no sense. So I think all of these can be addressed in a firmware, hopefully in a ASAP firmware, because all these things should have been in camera during release, honestly. And again, when I did my embargo video, I had an afternoon with the camera. I forfeited some of my time so Connor could have some time with it. And that took up half the day. And so I had even less time to mess with it and learn about it. You know, all those things, people are always putting so much pressure on YouTubers saying, oh, they didn't talk about this, talk about that. Guys, half of the time we don't get to really push these cameras in time for the release of the videos. If the audience was in the YouTuber's position, it'd be the same story for you guys. So please have some understanding. Let's all be adults here. That leads me into the quick menus. So Nikon's quick menu is pretty great. It's just like the Lumix cameras, like every camera manufacturer has a awesome little quick menu they can access just while you're like filming and everything. This is fine, but there's some features that you can't get to there. So they made a whole nother sub menu. I don't know why they didn't just combine the two. It doesn't make sense. The original quick menu should maybe just be for stills mode, and then this menu should be for video mode. I don't know. What's annoying though, is I set my my custom button 3 to turn off and on my LUTs. What's annoying is there's like 2 different LUT options in the menu to turn on and off. We have the view assist, which doesn't do anything in Red RAW. The view assist is for the Nikon RAW and the H.265. And then if you set that button to there, it will turn on and off if you're in those modes. But if you're in Red Log, that custom button doesn't do anything. But in order to make it do it, you have to go to another option in the menu. And then in this sub menu, you can control it. Like, this is what I mean. It's like, this is, even though the image quality is amazing on this camera, there's little decisions happening here where it's like, now this will start going into, you know, more of the film tools. This is where Brandon Talbot will come into play here. But before I bring him in on this video, there's a lot of issues with the exposure tools on the ZR. First off, the zebras get locked to whatever log or view assist is on. Zebras should be locked to the log footage. So no matter what view assist you have or what LUT you have on, the zebra should always be locked to the log image. Or you can have an option to where it's locked to the log image or it's locked to your preview image. The reason I like it locked to my log image is because no matter what LUT I have on, and this will get into Red RAW here, and this is where Talbot will come into play. When you're in Red RAW, when you mess with your ISO doesn't have an actual effect on your exposure. It has an effect on the way you set exposure, but not the actual exposure, if that makes sense. So when you're in Red RAW and you change your ISO, the zebras are affected by that. So again, the zebras are affected by whatever LUT you have on, whatever view assist you have on, and whatever ISO you're at in Red RAW. None of that should be happening. All that should be locked to the log. On Red cameras though, you don't have to do that. You can just put your LUT on there and you can adjust your ISO to change your exposure as long as your traffic lights are set properly. Again, when Talbot comes in, he'll explain the traffic lights for everybody who's not familiar with that. And some of the other content creators and people who are buying the ZR reaching out to me kind of like, hey, how the heck do I expose this camera? I'm using it, but a bunch of my exposures are underexposed or overexposed, and I don't know what's going on. This is the issue. Now, to better explain why Red RAW is so amazing in all the Red cameras, it's not just because of the image quality. It's not just because it's RAW. It's not because just of the compression options. It's also because of how easy it is to expose, especially on run and gun shoots. This is the official Nikon ZR guy. I'm kidding. He doesn't like that, but he knows a lot about the ZR. So here's Talbot.
I imagine many of you that are interested in the Nikon ZR or already have one are probably new to Red's RAW workflow. The Red R3D codec is definitely best in the business, and it's probably what most people think of when they think of Red. However, what makes Red truly special beyond the codec is the workflow and the innovative tools that Red gives you to help you nail exposure. One of those innovative tools is the traffic light exposure system, and it's probably something you've been hearing many of us ask for in the Nikon ZR. And honestly, it is probably the easiest and fastest way to nail exposure in a camera, in my opinion. There are 3 different ways of affecting exposure in basically every single camera. The first one that you have is the actual like iris of the lens, right? You open it up, you let more light in. If you stop it down, you're letting less light in. Next, there is the shutter speed or the shutter angle of the camera. And you know what that is. And finally is the ISO or the gain that you're going to apply to the sensor to brighten the image. However, in a Red camera, ISO doesn't really work that way. I can go up to my iris just like another camera and I can drop the exposure down. And if I do, you can see the waveform, the histogram, it also drops. So I'm actually affecting the light that is hitting the sensor using the aperture. The other thing I can do is change the shutter angle or the shutter speed. Right now I have it set to 180. If I drop it way down to 90, then I'm doing the same thing, effectively closing down the amount of light that is hitting the sensor. Now I want you to pay attention to this. Up here are the traffic lights. We'll explain this here in a second. But right now, the red and blue channel are clipping from the loss of information in the shadows. So those arrows that are pointing down are saying that the red and blue channel don't have enough information there to light them up. If we go from 800 ISO and punch all the way up to 6400 ISO, watch what happens to the screen, but also pay attention to what happens to the stoplights. So let's go all the way up to 6400. The stoplights didn't change. Even though the screen is now blown out and it's super white hot, it's saying that there's still not enough information in the shadows. And that's because the stoplights are raw sensor data. And in a red camera, ISO is simply metadata. We aren't actually applying the same type of gain as we would to another camera. So if the screen is blown out, but the information from the sensor is saying that there's not enough light, how do we accurately measure exposure? Well, this is the point of the traffic lights. Each one of those lights represent a color channel, red, green, and blue. And essentially, they only light up if enough information is lost, whether that's in the highlights or in the shadows. And like I said, those arrows pointing down are saying that there is too little information in the shadows to get those to turn off. So they are essentially clipping, meaning we've lost information. Now, I could go to a shutter of 360 degrees and you can see that the blue channel just turned off, meaning it's got enough information there. And if I turn my ISO down, again, that didn't do anything. It's just metadata. So now, even though it looks good on the monitor, the sensor, the amount of information that's hitting the sensor is exactly the same. So I've got a few options here. If I want to get enough light on the sensor, I could either open up the aperture or I can light the scene more, right? I can turn up my lights in this case. Now, the opposite would be true if the stop lights were on because I was clipping my highlights. I would either ND down, I would close the aperture down, stop the aperture down, or I would decrease the amount of light in the scene. But changing ISO is not going to do it. We really want the traffic light system in the ZR because currently exposure with this camera is pretty difficult. And one of the reasons is depending on where you put the ISO on the waveform, that clipping point changes. It is all over the point. And to illustrate my point, check this out. If I come into the low base ISO of this camera, which is 800, but that's not really relevant, but I come up to 1600, the waveform clipping point is at a certain point. However, if I come back into the high sensitivity and click on 1600, same ISO, the clipping point is in a completely different place, despite it being the same ISO. Having an on or off system like the traffic light system implemented in the ZR would greatly reduce the amount of second guessing and errors that I get when it comes to exposure. And I don't know about you, but if I'm constantly second guessing waveforms, ISO, exposure, or even worse, having to reshoot a clip because I missed exposure, well, that's just stress I don't want or need. Anyway, I hope this helps. Thanks, Cam. I'll catch you guys later. Peace.
So I think Grandpa Talbot did an amazing job explaining to you guys why we love using red cameras and why people love using red cameras. I am confident that Nikon can fix all of this. And I am confident they could do it sooner rather than later. A few more little things, and then that's gonna be it for this video. Again, I hate doing simple videos like this. I do feel responsibility on YouTube to make more intentional films and videos and yada, yada, yada. But sometimes we just gotta sit down and have conversations like this. Now, the other big thing, as I was saying before, there's no red raw compression options on here. Again, this is what I mean by this camera's a little bit of a Frankenstein of a camera. So even though it's incredibly robust, incredibly strong, incredibly powerful, the image quality in red raw specifically is insane. H.265, it needs an update, needs some help. With all that and all the headaches and hiccups and issues with this currently at the current firmware, it's still worth using because of how freaking good that red raw is. I do intense color grading. I do power windows all over. I'm tracking those windows. I'm pushing colors over the place. I'm stretching my dynamic range. Even for the most simple videos, I treat my YouTube videos as if they're being delivered to a high-end client. That's just the intention that I put into it because that's what I like doing. So red raw for me, I get way more bang for my buck in the red raw. Okay.